What on earth is AUDHD? Have I got it? If so, does it really matter at my stage of life? Listen through to the end of this podcast where I'll disclose 6 practical steps to manage. Welcome back to Peace Unplugged, where we delve into the complexities of the human mind, shedding light on topics often misunderstood or overlooked. I'm your host, Martin, and today I'm navigating a fascinating, sometimes contentious subject, the world of ADHD and the emerging discussion around AUDHD. This is a combination of ADHD and autism, or ASD. It feels like that everywhere you look these days, someone is talking about ADHD. TikTok filters, memes, online quizzes. It's been something significant culturally. But beneath the surface, there's a serious conversation happening, fueled by new research, personal revelations, and persistent stigma. I have memories of my personal experience of hearing my mother discuss Martin's a dreamer who doesn't pay attention in school. That was reported by my school teacher when I was about 5 years old. This went right through to extreme anxiety when sitting exams as a teenager, panic and rushing thoughts, accompanied by reading too much into questions and misinterpreting them. I believe this also led to the struggles I experienced in the workplace. For decades, ADHD was largely viewed as a childhood disorder, often associated with hyperactive boys struggling in school. But now the narrative is rapidly changing. We're understanding it as a complex, often lifelong neurodevelopmental, that's a difficult word to say, isn't it? Neurodevelopmental condition affecting attention, impulse control, and executive function. And it presents very differently in adults, and particularly in women and those assigned female at birth, where it's often internalized, manifesting as inattentiveness, emotional dysregulation, and perfectionism rather than overt hyperactivity. This, of course, leads to a significant problem: late diagnosis or misdiagnosis. Let's talk about the diagnostic criteria itself. The DSM-5, while updated, still faces criticism for its historical bias. Many clinicians and researchers like Dr. Russell Barkley, a leading expert on ADHD, have consistently highlighted the impact of executive function deficits as central to ADHD. Beyond just inattention and hyperactivity, his work emphasizes how these executive function challenges affect everything from planning and organization to emotional regulation and working memory. Now, what about the conversation around this term describes individuals who experience traits of both autism spectrum disorder, known as ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. For a long time, the clinical consensus was that you couldn't be diagnosed with both. The DSM-5 even explicitly stated this, but thankfully, the DSM-5 removed that exclusionary clause in 2013, opening the door for dual diagnosis. The thinking is evolving rapidly. Dr. Tony Atwood, a renowned clinical psychologist specializing in Asperger's syndrome, now referred to as ASD, has spoken extensively about this overlap. He points out that the diagnostic criteria for both conditions can sometimes mask each other. For example, a person with ADHD might struggle with social cues due to inattention, while a person with ASD might struggle due to different social processing. It's a Venn diagram of experiences, and for many, understanding both components provides a more complete picture of the neurotype. This brings us to a significant point of controversy and stigmatization. When many people hear ADHD, they still think of a child bouncing off the walls. When they hear autism, they might conjure up outdated stereotypes. The idea that someone could have both is still met with skepticism, sometimes even dismissal, particularly within the older clinical circles or general public. There's a fear that if everyone is neurodivergent, then the term loses its meaning. This overlooks the genuine struggles and unique strengths that come with these diagnoses. This leads us to the core question many of our listeners are asking: do I have ADHD? How do I know? And do I need a diagnosis? It's natural to wonder especially when symptoms resonate with your own experiences. The explosion of content online means more people are recognizing patterns in themselves that they previously just thought were character flaws or personal failings. Things like chronic procrastination, time blindness, emotional dysregulation, difficulty starting tasks, hyperfocus, and sensory sensitivities. These are common experiences for many neurodivergent individuals, and that's certainly true in my own personal experience. But here's the crucial point: self identification is a starting point, not a diagnosis. While online resources can be incredibly validating and provide language for your experience, a formal diagnosis comes from a trained professional. That's typically a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a neurodevelopmental specialist. And do you need a diagnosis? This is where the discussion gets nuanced. On the one hand, a diagnosis can be profoundly validating. It can explain a lifetime of struggles, reduce self blame, and open doors to accommodations, medications, and specific therapies like CBT or ADHD coaching. It can be a massive relief, allowing you to understand your brain better and advocate for your needs. On the other hand, the diagnosis process itself can be a significant hurdle. It's often expensive, time consuming, and inaccessible for many, especially in regions with limited mental health resources. There's also the fear of being labelled or having a diagnosis impact that can be on employment or insurance, despite the legal protections. And some argue that if you're able to implement effective strategies and build a fulfilling life without formal labels, perhaps the diagnostic burden isn't always necessary. This perspective emphasizes on self-understanding and practical support over clinical classification. However, most experts, including Dr. Ned Hallowell, psychiatrist and author who himself has ADHD, strongly advocate for diagnosis where symptoms cause significant impairment. He argues that the diagnosis allows for targeted intervention and the development of a deeper self-understanding, shifting away from what's wrong with me to how does my brain work differently. The decision to pursue a diagnosis is deeply personal. If you suspect you might have ADHD or AUDHD, consider these steps. Educate yourself from reputable sources. Look for academic articles, books by specialists, and professional organisations. Reflect on your own experiences. Do these symptoms consistently impact your life in any significant way? Consult a professional. Start with your primary care doctor, who can refer you to a specialist for assessment. Remember, understanding your own neurotype, whether formally diagnosed or self-identified, is about empowering yourself. It's about finding tools, strategies, communities that foster well-being, rather than struggling in silence. The conversation around ADHD and AUDHD is rich, complex, and constantly evolving. As the research progresses and more people feel empowered to share their experience, we are collectively moving towards a more inclusive understanding of the diverse ways our brains can be wired. This is a crucial step in dismantling stigma and creating a society that supports all minds. Managing AUDHD, autism and ADHD, that is, from a personal perspective, often requires strategies that account for the unique push-pull dynamic of both those conditions. The need for structure and sensory calm, as in autism, mixed with the challenge of executing and maintaining focus in ADHD. Okay, so as promised, here are 6 ways I've researched and I recognise in myself how to personally manage AUDHD. Number 1, embrace structural flexibility with time blocking. See the problem? The ADHD brain struggles with time blindness and executive dysfunction, while the autistic brain thrives on routine. Pure routine can be too rigid for ADHD. So the strategy: use time blocking for major tasks or activities, but leave flexible slots or transition buffers between them. The action to take: instead of scheduling work 9 to 5 p.m., focus on a project A, say 9:30 to 11, followed by a 30-minute reset slot for a moment for make that for movement or sensory input. Then perhaps deep work on your emails, 11:30 to 1 p.m. This combines the ADHD need for novelty and breaks with the autistic need for clarity. Okay, so point 2. Design a sensory informed workspace. So the problem can be ADHD often craves stimulation. That is like background noise, movement, but autism is easily overwhelmed by or distracted by sensory input, fluorescent lights, for instance, or unexpected sounds. The strategy: create an environment to provide the right amount of stimulation. The action: utilize noise cancelling headphones to manage auditory input, autism, but play lo-fi or focus specific music for ADHD for background stimulation. Control lighting, dimmer, natural light, or specialized bulbs, and have fidget tools readily available to channel excess energy. Moving on to point number 3. Implement external scaffolding systems. The problem? Both conditions cause severe executive dysfunction, making internal trafficking like remembering appointments or steps unreliable. The strategy? Outsource your executive function to external, visually clear systems. The action? Use a visual whiteboard or a brightly coloured app-based checklist for daily tasks. Break down overwhelming tasks. Autism's preference for detail into micro steps. Then use a visual system as a prompt to get started. ADHD's need for novelty and activation. Point number 4. Schedule and prioritize energy recovery, shutdowns and recharge. The problem? The ADHD-driven tendency is to overcommit and hyperfocus, and that leads to burnout, which is compounded by autistic sensory overload, resulting in intense shutdowns or meltdown. The strategy? Treat rest and sensory management as a non-negotiable scheduled task. The action? Build in scheduled downtime. For example, 20 minutes in a quiet room before you start to feel overwhelmed. This prevents a full autistic shutdown and recharges the limited executive battery for the ADHD tasks ahead. Point number 5. Use special interests as focus tools. Those hyperfocus hacking. Problem? ADHD struggles to maintain interests in mundane tasks, while autism can generate intense, consuming special interests, i.e. hyperfocus. The strategy: strategically integrate your special interests into work or self-care. The action: if your special interest is data organization or a specific video game, use a timer to gamify a boring work task, such as with ADHD. Or use your special interest as a guaranteed reward after completing a difficult task. The intense focus of special interest is harnessed as a motivator rather than a distraction. Practice radical self-acceptance. Problem: the chronic feeling of being wrong or too much due to social masking and years of misdiagnosis severely impacts self-esteem. The strategy? Acknowledge that your brain has unique processing needs and advocate for them. And the action: stop forcing yourself into neurotypical molds. Use your knowledge of AuDHD to clearly communicate your needs to family, friends, and employers. For example, I process better in writing, not verbally. Or, I need a 5-minute physical break to reset my focus. This reduces the energy drain of masking and fighting your natural operating system. I hope you found this podcast today useful. If so, please subscribe and share it with other people. Thank you for watching and listening. Wishing you peace and tranquility.